BookPage. I'm here at RWA with Victoria Alexander, the author of many books, including The Perfect Mistress and His Mistress by Christmas, which is coming in October. So your most recent book, there's a little bit of a role reversal between the two leads because the man is the one who wants to get married and the woman doesn't feel the same. That makes the book really fun to read. I imagine it was pretty fun to write.
You know, it's fun to finish writing a book. Writing a book is truly the hardest thing I've ever done. And you're talking about His Mistress by Christmas, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I liked about that, in terms of that role reversal, is it's a Victorian setting. When you got married, everything that you had became the property of your husband. There were ways to get around that in terms of legal documents and arrangements and that sort of thing, but basically you pretty much lost everything. And for a woman who was used to running her own life and her own finances and her own affairs, it seemed to me to make sense if you had a very strong woman that she wanted a man in her life, but she wasn't willing to sacrifice everything for that. So I thought it was kind of fun, yeah.
Well, and Veronica falls in love with Sebastian, the lead in that book, who's a writer. He's kind of a travel writer in the Victorian era. And her first introduction to him is through reading his books, which she finds kind of sensual, she says, the descriptions and stuff. Have you ever had a literary crush?
Oh, wow. I don't think so.
Not yet?
Oh, no, what have I lost? I tend to fall in love with my heroes because they occupy my mind and I'm thinking about them all the time. And generally they're the kind of guy that I would have a crush on. Sebastian was great fun because I find he was an explorer, an adventurer, and the books that he had written up to the point of the story had all been accounts of his adventures. I find that whole Victorian explorer thing really exciting, and the more I read about real life Victorian explorers, the more I think that one, they were probably insane, and two, I mean, it's just this fabulous adventure, the things they faced. In researching this book, I also found a book, and I think it was put out by or sponsored by the Royal Geographic Society. It's kind of like a handbook for explorers, and it told these gentlemen in the 1880s what provisions they needed and how many servants they needed and how to treat various diseases and illnesses and things you would find in the jungle. So I found that was all fascinating. Now I fall in love with my own heroes. But a literary crush, that's an interesting concept.
Do you have a favorite hero of the ones you've written? Or is your latest usually your favorite?
Oh, I am crazy about Sebastian because he is that adventurer. And the story, the book I just finished, I like him a lot too. Yeah, I don't have a favorite. I don't, it varies from moment to moment depending on what I'm working on. Now I think I need to find a favorite.
Yeah.
I can't pick. If you ask me what's my very favorite book, I can't pick one because I say that my favorite is the one I just finished, and that sounds like a really pat answer, but it's true because I've just finished living with these people forever, for so many months that it took me to write the book. So finishing it, this is my favorite book, and I really think that the one that I just finished is always the best book I've ever written because I'm trying constantly to do better. And anyway, so my favorite is the last one. Well,
I know before you were a writer, you were a television reporter. Could you tell us the story of how you became a romance author?
Sure. I think reporters in general either want to write a book, are writing a book, have written a book. It's just the nature of what we do, what we are. I'd always wanted to write, and I had, a couple different very odd books written. or not written, but started. And I did a story with a romance writer, and found a local chapter of RWA. And I went to a couple meetings, and I decided that no matter what I ended up writing in terms of fiction, I would learn a lot from this group. So, and I liked the people there. So I ended up joining, and I joined, it was another 4 years before I started writing. And I didn't even read romance at the time. I'd always read a lot of popular fiction, but I hadn't read romance. And about a year before I started trying to write it myself, I started reading it. And I found one author, and then another, Johanna Lindsay and Julie Garwood, and then I found the Regency period. And I read romance, nothing but romance, for like a year, and voraciously read it, because I fell in love with romance. I found great heroes and strong heroines, and just fell in love with romance and decided that was what I wanted to write. And then I did.
What book would you recommend to somebody who was just getting started out reading romance?
One of mine. I stumbled upon Julie Garwood and Johanna Lindsay, and they write fabulous books. And that's what I started with. And then, like I said, I discovered the Regency. I would buy everything that I figured, I discovered the Regency and knew the dates. I would buy everything that was set in that setting. And I have this huge collection of traditional Regencies from when I started. I would recommend reading me. I think The Perfect Mistress is a great book. But I love all of my books, and I think they're true to the time without being too, I don't know how to explain it. When you read something that was actually written in 1850s, 1880s, the cadence is not what we're used to. So it's often more difficult for us to read. So I think mine have the right feel of the historical period, but are still appeal to a contemporary reader in terms of how they read. So yeah, I'd recommend myself.
And what do you think is the most important element to a successful romance?
I'm writing books that are 400 plus pages, manuscript-wise. So there has to be something beyond the romance. I think of it as different threads in a book. One is the romance has its own kind of plot and energy, but tied in with that, you need a story. You need a good story to wrap through that romance and wrap that romance around. And I think they go hand in hand. I mean, obviously a good story that keeps the reader wondering what's going to happen next. And characters, I think that people can relate to. I find it very hard to root for a character I don't like. The only one I can think of really is Scarlett O'Hara. She is just not a real good hero. She's a fabulous character, not a good heroine. You don't really like her. And you feel a little bad for her at the end of Gone with the Wind, but she really deserved what she got. I think you want to create characters that people can relate to, that people like, and stories that make them wondering what's going to happen next. So I think both of those go together.
Well, thank you very much for talking to us today.
Sure.